6. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after we say A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, we have reached in Surah Al-Hud verses 15 and 16. And these verses are very important in terms of the idea of niyyah. And as you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an speaks about niyyah, the importance of our intention. And this is extremely important in the last couple of days of Ramadan, where we need to focus our niyyah on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make sure that all of our actions, whether it's the ibadat, the prayers, the sadaqat, the charity, is for the right reasons. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins these verses by saying, "Man kana yuridu al-hayata ad-dunya wa zinataha nuwaffi ilayhim a'manahum fiha wa hum fiha la yubkhasun." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, it says that those people who yurid, and this, as the ulama, they say, in the Qur'an, when you see the word yurid or rada, this has to do oftentimes with the idea of niyyah, of intention. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, whoever desires, whoever is saying their irada, their will, is for this dunya, and its decorations, and its beauty, the zinatuha, whether it's in terms of houses, or wealth, or children, or spouses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Nuwaffi ilayhim," then we'll give it to them. So this is important. As our Imam, Sheikh Ismail, he said in his recitation, "Kana sa'yukum mashkura." What is our sa'i? Inna sa'yakum lashatta. Verily, we have different strive. We strive for different things. So in the month of Ramadan is an opportunity for us to reflect and think, what are we striving for? What is our purpose? Is it simply for a promotion? Is it simply for the next big house? Is it for a nice car? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whatever your sa'i or your irada is, there's a most likely good chance that you're going to achieve it. If you write down your goals and you work every single day for those goals, there's a good chance that you will achieve all of those goals. So what are those goals that we have mentally, spiritually, in our heart and our soul? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, أَعْمَانَهُمْ فِيهَا وَهُمْ فِيهَا لَا يُبْخَسُونَ. And they won't have anything of deficiency on their deeds. Here the ulama, they cite that this verse has to do with the niyat, and particularly they connect it to the famous hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Subhanallah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, verily our actions are based on our intentions. And the ulama here, they quote that the niyyah distinguishes between the adat wal ibadat. They say, tamyizul ibadat min adat. For examples, man tawadda li tabarrud wa tanazzuf. So if someone does wudu, and they're feeling very hot, and they just do the wudu to cool themselves down, then they don't get the intention for wudu. That when they stand up for prayer, their prayer is not valid, because they were just trying to cool themselves off. Simply if someone was tanazzuf, if someone was doing ghusl, just to clean themselves, then that doesn't count as a ritual ghusl. That their janaba has not been expunged. So when we think about the adat wa ibadat, we do things on a consistent basis. But there are particular things that we do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone simply fasts the month of Ramadan and sees the month as a health routine, as a diet, then they don't necessarily get the reward. But if their fasting is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course there are other benefits, but the intention has to be, the irada has to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a famous scholar, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, he says, رُبَّ عَمَلٍ صَغِيرٍ تُعَظِّمُهُ النِّيَّةِ. It may be possible that a small action someone does that we think is insignificant is great because of its niyyah. That someone's, subhanAllah, driving, walking on the street, and they see something that is an impediment, a branch, they see something, some trash, and they pick it up. And they say, I'm going to do this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He loves the people who are clean. مُتَطَهِّرِينَ. Then that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may raise that person up and give that person so many good deeds for that small little action that they did. And he says, وَرَبَّ عَمَلٍ كَبِيرًا تُصَغِّرُهُ النِّيَّةِ. And maybe someone may do something huge. They may build a masjid. They may give $1 million. They may help their children in buying a new car or going to school, but their intention is not pure. That big deed that all of us look and say, wow, that person did this amazing thing. In fact, it's not worth anything because it wasn't done for the right reason. And we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an focuses on the irada, focuses on the niyyah. To the point that this verse and others, people talk about riyah, the danger of riyah, people watching us. And this is especially important in Ramadan and in the masjid when there's so many people here. And in Eid when there are going to be thousands. That are we doing these actions, whether it's fasting or sadaqah or the prayer, just so people are watching us? Or are we truly doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, woe, beware to who? The musallin. To all of us. All of us are musallin. We take pride in the fact that, mashallah, all of you have come here for Fajr, which is remarkable. You've come here despite maybe praying Taraweeh. You come here despite a couple hours of sleep. And we've come here for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are the musallin. This is honorific. But we have to ask ourselves, if we did all this work just so other people could see us, then there's no value. There's no meaning. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these people, they pray and they neglect their prayer, and others, they pray just so other people can see them. Yura'un. That we're not here right now in Fajr at 6:22 in the morning on a work day, on a school day, simply for the views and appreciation of other people. Our intentions, inshallah, are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see that this verse is also connected to other verses in the Qur'an. In Surah Al-Shura, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ حَرْثَ الْآخِرَةِ نَزِدْ لَهُ فِي حَرْثِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example of harth, within agriculture, in terms of land. That whoever wants this harth, this agriculture of this dunya, then we'll increase it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that. Says that if someone works for this dunya, then they may succeed in getting this dunya. They may get more crops. They may get more agriculture. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ حَرْثَ الدُّنْيَا نُؤْتِهِ مِنْهَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ نَصِيبٍ. SubhanAllah. And if you're just working for this dunya, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it, but you won't get anything in the akhirah. So one of the things that's beautiful in our religion is that we believe in goodness in this life and in the hereafter. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we want goodness in this life and in the hereafter. But the majority of people are just working for this dunya. They're just working for the present, what is close, what is near, what they can see. And they don't necessarily understand the ghaib, the unseen. They don't necessarily understand that at the end of the time we'll raise and stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they don't understand how good deeds can be multiplied. That the small thing that you did in this month of Ramadan, whether it's a small prayer, an act of sadaqah, a dua, that small thing could be multiplied in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that on the Day of Judgment you see that good deed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enters you into His paradise. And lastly, we see that many of the ulama, the scholars, the mufassirin, they connect this to a hadith, a very famous one that many of us are familiar with. On the Day of Judgment, the first three people that are called are people, one person who is a qari, recites the Qur'an very beautifully. And the person is called and is asked, why did you recite the Qur'an? And said, I recited the Qur'an for your pleasure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no. You recited so people could say that you're a good reciter. And then another person who's rich and has wealth and comes forward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, why did you spend the money? He said, I did it to help my family and to support the poor. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no. You said it because people say you're generous, you're rich. And then lastly, a martyr, someone who comes and fought in the wars of Islam. And then is asked, why did you fight? Why did you die? He said, I did it for you. He said, no, you said that you did it so people would say you were brave and that he was a martyr. So we see in these three things that these are the things that people often strive for. We give wealth, we fight, we try to recite the Qur'an beautifully. But when we do these things, we really have to ask ourselves, what is our niyyah? What is our intention? Are we doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So brothers and sisters in Islam, to conclude, we see these verses is very important in terms of the context of sincerity. This is a month of Ramadan where we have to do ikhlas. We have to purify our niyyah. Why did we do this? Why did we pray tarawih? Why did we give the sadaqah? Why did we pay our zakah? Why did we come to fajr? And really look deep into our hearts and ask ourselves that. And to really think, what is our sa'i? What do we nureed? What do we really want in this life? Because if we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reciprocate. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبُكُمُ اللَّهِ. Part of this deen is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to love you. Not just that we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we want a reciprocal relationship. That we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. So in this moment, these precious moments, these last couple of days, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on our niyyah, our ikhlas, and our spiritual goals, not just our worldly ones. And as the advice to myself and to all of you, some of the things that we can do to really purify the niyyah is to focus on the moments when we're by ourselves. Alhamdulillah, this is beautiful. That to come together in the masjid, to pray the fajr or the tarawih. But it's also an opportunity for us to say, yes, being with other people encourages me to come and do the ibadat. But that should encourage us also that when we're home and by ourselves, that we're in a state of khalwa, when only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees us, that we continue our prayers, that we continue our sadaqah. So in these last couple of days, I encourage all of us to take moments when we're by ourselves, when no one is watching, and we do a dua, we do a prayer, we do qiyam al-layl, we do tahajjud. And in those moments when no one is watching, and we don't have any fear of riya, that we give sadaqah. This is a deen. This is a religion where we say, aqimu as-salat wa atu zakah. That many of us, mashallah, we're amazing of the ibadat. We're amazing in the salawat, in the tahajjud. But we also need to remember that our deen is also a religion of generosity. It's a religion of our money, of purification. And that we need to help those people who are in need, whether they're in Gaza, or in Sudan, or in Kashmir, or the Rohingyas, wherever they are. It's an opportunity for us to help people here that are local, that need our support, and our brothers and sisters around the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.